Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Masonic Podcast, where today we will be discussing myths about Masonry and business.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have myself, Very Worshipful Brother Matthew Appel, and Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung, and Right Worshipful Brother Trevor McKeown from up in the Grand Lodge of British Columbia in the Yukon, and also Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth, who is here with me in the Grand Lodge of Washington. And we're going to have a discussion about myths relating to Masonry and business. It's an idea that sort of just occurred to us because there seem to be a few of them out there. At least one of which is that if I join Masonry, I will be rich. All the brothers will use me to do whatever it is, and that it's sort of like the Rotary? Is that the business centered club? Does anybody have any? You guys have any experience with that happening?
Actually, a bit of a different experience, somewhat. There was there's been guys who've tried to join our lodge and said they were out. They're very direct with the purpose of, they're improving their business connections. And I told them, well, it's kind of really not the right reason to be joining, and consequently, they never joined. But I do know of instances where one of our lodges in our district is fairly well-to-do financially, and they've been bequeathed money from estates and things like that. And there was a brother in one end of the valley that went up there and joined that lodge as an affiliate, and tried to network his way through that lodge and convince people to invest in things and into his business and so on, and took advantage of that, and was later found out and exposed and dealt with. But it was sad to know that it actually happened, right? Got to know some of the widows and tried to get them to participate in some of his ventures as well, right? Pretty low when you think about it, right?
I've had only a couple of experiences over the years. We had one fellow never in my lodge, but I remember there was one in my district at one time who the only time you ever saw him, he was promoting whatever his latest stock market deal was. And I don't know if somebody eventually told him off or what, but I suddenly stopped seeing him at district visits after about a year. So I assume that, and this was some years ago. Certainly this is a problem we have had for centuries, because if you look at our literature, and we talk about in our what little promotional brochures we did, or information we put out in years past, statements from Grand Lodge, what should a candidate know about Freemasonry, that sort of thing. And we constantly stress the fact that we're not an insurance plan, we're not a burial society, and we're not for business networking. And that constantly gets played out, but obviously not enough, because we still get people who think that. I think a bigger problem is not so much those who think they're going to make business contacts and join Freemasonry, because they'll quickly be disillusioned and they'll go away. But it's the fact that the general public seems to feel that we do that. I was told once that British Columbia is mostly made up of resource towns, mining towns, fishing towns, mills, whatever, logging mills, whatever. Some town up north, I do not recall which one, but I was told by a non-Mason who didn't know that I was a Mason at the time, that in that town, you didn't get promoted in the mill, or you didn't get a bank loan, or, you couldn't do anything unless you were a Mason. Didn't get the promotion unless you were a Mason. You didn't get a job unless you were a Mason. And this would have been in the 40s and 50s. So there's an off chance, actually, that there was some preferential treatment going on. Small town, people like to help out their friends.
Well, to speak just to that exactly, I had an experience where my uncle, who was from Alberta and worked up north in the rigs as a welder his entire life, right? He came and lived with us and rented a room off of us, and for a few years there. And when he initially came and found out that I was a Freemason, he wasn't too fond of Freemasonry, and I was like, well, why? And he told stories of preferential treatment on job sites where guys would show up for jobs and be told there was no jobs, but then all of a sudden a guy with a ring and a handshake shows up, and he got work right after the other guys got turned away, like within the same day, and so I had to. It took a while for me to convince him that it wasn't really it's not supposed to be where we treat people differently, right? But I can understand, that it's a brotherhood and somebody trying to help another brother out, right? He still, after years, he warmed up to some of my friends that were brothers and whatnot, but still kept that opinion about Freemasonry.
Did he know for a fact, though, that the fellow doing the hiring was, in truth, a Mason?
Yeah. Well, he said he often observed, a handshake, and, he observed the rings as well, but, he observed that himself, and he thought, wow, okay.
So the problem then is not so much public perception, is how we ourselves are behaving. We're not following.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's interesting. So while on one hand, I think that's bad that we are behaving that way. On the other hand, when I have had a couple of real estate things happen in my life, and there's a guy who's a good friend of mine. Sorry, David. There's a guy who's a good friend of mine up here who's a brother and a real estate agent. And whenever I have a question or any thing real estate related, he's the guy I turn to. And I find myself, it's not like I'm excluding other real estate agents deliberately, but he's the one I know and I like, and we have a rapport. And so there's a line there somewhere, but it's hard to put my finger exactly on.
But see, that one's a little bit different because you know him, you have a rapport, right? What my uncle was saying was strangers coming onto the job site, flashing their ring and given a handshake, and they're getting the job over somebody else that was just told no, there was no work, right? So it's a little bit different, right? And then, but it does make you think of what was really portrayed in years gone by.
So, and I think some of our members were taught in Lodge to take care of each other. Without recognizing that was supposed to be a lesson they were to take out to the general public. Sure, you're going to go to a real estate agent who he's either gone to the same school, goes to the same church, belongs to the same lodge as your next door neighbor. Kids are in play school together. Networking. And so just because you've met someone through Freemasonry doesn't mean that you're going to take in your business. But it also means that you are not going to take in your business either.
Right. And we have a guy in our lodge who's a realtor, and he doesn't come. He still pays his dues, but he doesn't come to lodge regular. And, he's often made comment about how he was a member of our lodge. He's been a member of our lodge for so long, so many years. And, never has he gotten any business out of it, but he's a member of the Rotary and he gets lots of business out of the Rotary. So he finds that to be very valuable. And so he spends more of his time there. I said, well, if you spent some of your time here and got to know your brothers without a business interest in the background, you might see some more of those types of things, because a guy would rather support a brother he knows and likes and, than a stranger. Well, if you're not here getting to know and be liked by your brethren, and then they're not going to know you to deal with you for business either. And
yeah, right. there's a point there where, so if I go to one of the other things is you hear people say, well, he cut you a deal, like you had your roof redone and you got it done for cheap because the guy who owns the company is a Mason. And if I were in that situation, I would not expect the guy to make me an outrageous deal just because we're both Masons, but I would expect him to observe the tenets of Masonry and conduct himself in a manner that, you hear horror stories of contractors or whoever that, leave jobs half done and shoddy work and et cetera. And I would expect a brother not to do that to anyone. Ergo, I would trust him with my business before, maybe not before another person, but I would start with that baseline.
Yeah. Well, you're trusting that because he's a brother, he's going to do right by you, period. And
right. Even if I were not a Mason, I would expect him to do right by me.
Right.
That's the rub. That's the rub. You expect professionalism and accurate work and on time and on budget work from anybody, whether it's the grocery clerk or whether it's the contractor. And so that's what I have a difficulty. I am a real estate broker. And so it is difficult that when I have a Mason I work with, when I'm trying to explain to them, I already give a very high level of care to all of my clients. And of course I still follow the tenets of Masonry. So for me, it's a double whammy when I'm working with a Mason. It's really a no-brainer. It shouldn't be a no-brainer, but I give that same level of care, a high level of care to all my clients. I don't want to go into real estate, but one of the things that prompted me to think about this topic too was an article I found, why you shouldn't be a Freemason. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not. If you Google why you shouldn't be a Freemason, it's by Brother Matt Gallagher out of Braden Lodge, number 168 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he has a brochure, essentially a whole post that he did on, if you're looking for business contacts, I'm going to shorten this. If you're looking for business contacts, you should join the Rotary Club. And he gives a link to the Rotary Club. And if you're looking for a place to serve pancakes, there's Wild Masons do a lot of pancakes. You join the Lions Club. And really, I'm a member of Lions Club. If you're looking for service, community service is really what that should be, but not just pancakes. And he said, if you're looking for a social club, you might want to look at the Elks. And, if you believe Freemasonry is a secret cabal or a new world order, then you probably want to join this guy with the conspiracy theory, Jesse Ventura. But it's a really neat little article that he posted. He's given me rights to reproduce it. And so if you want to, it's on, he moved it from his original website on Braden's Lodge to practicalfreemasonry.com, a little plug for his website, practicalfreemasonry.com. I'll post a link in the show notes about it, but it's a really good article. And if you want to have something to give to somebody, if somebody's coming, like your friend that's a real estate agent that's not visiting your lodge, maybe they should have this, and maybe it should be included in a 6 steps packet to give to somebody. And I think we do that in our 6 steps. One of the 12 questions you ask, or 15 questions you ask, is that, hey, do you understand that there's no advancement or business gain from this process? But it might be good. I've heard of some lodges, if they don't have any leadership experience or any other things that they can prove that they, maybe they should go and join Rotary or go and join Lions Club or join Elks, move up in the ranks, get some opportunity to develop themselves as a speaker or as a officer or other areas, then come back to Freemasonry. That was interesting.
Yeah, and so the other side of this coin for interest in between business and Masonry also is that there are people who make things for Masons, and there are some Masons who get really grumpy about the fact that they charge for it, or that they charge enough for it that they, make a profit on this. They're making whatever, books or baseball hats or belt buckles or whatever, and they're selling them to Masons. And how come you're making
Masonic points that does.
How come you're making a profit on this? You're profiting off of masonry. And at some point, why would someone bother making a book or a belt buckle or whatever if they're not making some money off of it? You know, it's not just if that's your business, that's your business.
The purpose of being in business is to make a profit. That's literally the bottom line.
The gray area for me was the approval. Our code, constitutions and code indicate that you're supposed to get approval from the Grand Master for everything you do that has a square and compass on it. And so as a business owner, do you have to get everything approved that you resell?
That's not exactly what it says.
I understand.
I would be curious to know what it does say. Do you have it in front of you?
I'll see if I can word search it in PDF here.
Because if you're not a Mason, in the business world, you're under absolutely no constraints.
Absolutely, exactly.
It encompasses on everything and sell it to us.
Absolutely.
So for us to somehow restrain trade on the part of
only Freemasons, only if you're a Mason. For example, if I wanted to start making scarves or something that had a square and compass on it, officially by the code, it says that I'm supposed to get approval for that, I believe. And as a simple example, we had some aprons that we had purchased, and I was adorning them. They were just simple white aprons. I was adorning them with a white fabric. I have an embroidery machine, and putting a square and compass on the apron. And I was not going to charge anything for them. I was going to give them to the lodge. Well, one of our past masters stood and said, "Did you get the Grand Master's approval for that?" And I thought, really? And so I did. I inquired with the Grand Master, and he said, "Well, you have to send me all the designs and ideas and variations." And I thought, well, that could be a couple of different variations. I'm just not going to bother with it. So that whole idea went down the tubes because I didn't want to mess with having to get approval and all that. Just putting a simple square and compass on there should have been okay.
So our Constitution in British Columbia and Yukon, not the Yukon, by the way, clearly states that the square and compasses has been registered by the Grand Lodge of Ontario, Grand Lodge of Canada and the province of Ontario, for the free and unfettered use of all grand jurisdictions in Canada and for the individual non-commercial use of individual members. You want to embroider it on your sweater or put it on your business card, not your corporate business card, but your personal business card. Constitution in BC allows that.
We need that language. Go, Matt. Sounds like you got it.
Well, I do. The problem is it's like a page and a half long. It's a Masonic offense to display the emblem on a place of business or in conjunction with business, in conjunction with private business or insurance or other enterprises, to solicit patronage, to accept employment with, solicit any persons violating the provisions of this section, permit the printing of Masonic books, journals, or periodicals using the word Mason, which are prohibited, use of which, oh my goodness. It seems so.
Summary, I'm going to cut this out.
My interpretation is, yeah, exactly. It's several sections long here. My interpretation, having read this before, was that if you're selling T-shirts or whatever, selling embroidered shirts, that you're fine as long as you're not using that as your, patronize me because I'm a Mason kind of thing. But that was my interpretation, and again, it's longer than I have time to read right now.
You should be able to, in both our jurisdictions, simplify it down to the fact that we can put it on anything we personally want, but we can't use it to promote our business. If our business is selling Masonic stuff, well, don't put it in your own corporate logo. But beyond that,
like there's a roofing company down the street from my house here, and they have a little Christian fish on all their trucks, and that's their thing, is they're a Christian company or whatever, and that's fine for them. But as a Mason, no. But if you want to sell trucks that have square and compasses on them, I'm not sure where that my analogy broke down there, but yeah. It's a
little, but it certainly looks like your Constitution could do a rewrite on that one. Ours, I'm trying to think. Yes, it does say for no commercial use. I can't remember the exact phrasing though. But I know it's only a little tiny section though. We get to the point real fast. The problem is if a non-Mason is using it and there's at least 3 tattoo parlors in the Lower Mainland that incorporated it into their logo. And a number of other companies. It was a computer company that briefly used it. A couple of drafting companies, and it's a little harder to tell them that they shouldn't be using it. But they're non-Masons, so other than the courts, we really have no recourse. So luckily we haven't had to go. We haven't gone after anyone so far. I hate to think of what it might cost, because I'm not even sure at this point, even though we registered it in Ontario for Canada, in the States, each state has to register it on their own. And I understand that only a little more than half of the states have gotten around to it. At this point, it would be a whole lot harder to defend our exclusive use in court. 150 years ago, we have all kinds of court cases where the judge said, well, that's obviously Freemasons. No, you can't put that on your beer bottle or on your patent medicine. Law isn't necessarily going to allow that anymore.
I don't mean to extend this, but that's a great example. I hadn't forgot about it. One of our lodges, I won't name their name, but they brew a beer and they put a square and compass. The A in their name of their lodge, they had used a square and compass symbol as the A, and they were not allowed to continue that.
But if it hadn't been a lodge, they probably could have.
They weren't selling it. It was just for their personal. It was only for their personal consumption. It wasn't for sale. It was just for. I don't know.
Yeah, so it had nothing to do with trademark law. It just had to do with the Constitution.
Yeah.
But you don't call it the Constitution. What do you call your
code?
Washington Masonic Code. Yeah. So it seems like we're slowing down our discussion of business and masonry. Does anybody else have any other thoughts or any other exciting myth bits?
I'm just glad that we have the verbiage that we do here in BC and Yukon, because I put that logo on everything that I possibly can, including my tail lights, all of my lodge business cards, our banquet cards, everything. And that it's everywhere, right? Yeah, so it's nice not to have to ask for permission.
All right. And on that note, on behalf of Trevor and Stephen and David and myself, thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the Working Tools Masonic Podcast. Goodbye.